Hello, good afternoon. I am Dr. Asli Hassan, Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Khalifa University. Today I'm going to be talking about learning by doing, part of a real-world curriculum. I'm sure many of you have heard about this Chinese proverb. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. I would like you just take a few seconds and write for us, tell us, do you agree with this proverb? Yes, if you do agree, yes, write yes, and we'll look at the answers later. And give us an example why you agree. If you say you don't agree, then give us an example. We will look at your answers at the end of the webinar, okay? So this is the proverb, and just tell us if you agree with this proverb and why, some example, or no if you don't agree and an example. Today, I'm going to be talking about what is called experiential learning. And experiential learning involves learning from experience. The theory was proposed by an educational psychologist called David Kolb, who was influenced by the work of other educational theorists, including John Dewey, Jean Piaget, and others. And that's David Kolb, and this is the picture photo next to it is John Dewey. In experiential learning, there are different design models that aim to embed learning within real-world context. And it could be a laboratory, or it could be an apprenticeship, it could be problem-based learning, it could be case-based learning, it could be project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, or cooperative work, community-based learning. Experiential learning, as I said before, involves learning from experience. So, I want to ask you, have you ever heard of John Dewey? If you did, tell us a little bit about what you heard about him. And write it on our comments and we'll look at it later. Today's outline, I'm going to be continuing speaking about experiential learning. We'll look at the core design principles. How do we create experiential learning in an educational environment? We will look at different design models, and we will also touch a little bit about online learning environment using experiential learning. The core design principles of an experiential learning focuses on learners reflecting on their experience of doing something. And the key word here beside experience is reflecting. Focuses on learners reflecting on their experience of doing something. And what is the purpose? To gain conceptual insight as well as a practical expertise. Kolb experiential learning model suggests 4 stages in this process. First, active experimentation, then concrete experience, then there's a reflective observation, lastly, but not least, an abstract conceptualization. Many universities have already adopted this type of learning model in their teaching, and they're applying to it. I'm going to go over the 4 models. These are just examples of experiential design models. There are many more. The first one is laboratory workshop or studio work. The second one is problem-based learning. The third is project-based learning. And lastly, I will speak a little bit about the inquiry-based learning. And we will go and learn from each one of them. The main function of the laboratory workshop or studio work really is to give students hands-on experience in choosing and using common scientific, engineering, or trades equipment appropriately. So the students get to try these equipments and experience it and use it in the laboratory or workshop. Also, it provides why are they doing it? To develop their motor skills in using scientific, engineering, or industrial tools or creative media. So motor tools, using their hands, eye-hand coordination, and all of that. It also it gives students an understanding of the advantages, and they can also see the limitations of the laboratory experiments. So they see the positive side and the negative side of that experiment. It also enables students to see science, engineering, or trade work in action. They actually see in almost like a real life, but this is in a laboratory or in a studio. Also, it enables students to test hypotheses or to see how well concepts, theories, procedures actually work when tested under laboratory conditions. And lastly, but not least, to teach also, it enables to teach students how to design and conduct experiments. Actually, we have one more. It enables also students to design and create objects or equipments in different physical media, so they can try it in a different way. So what are the values of laboratory classes? Well, they have a pedagogical value because they move things from concrete, observing phenomena, to abstract, understanding the principles or theories. So they see the concrete at the beginning and they move to an abstract thinking, and they can then understand the conceptual concepts and conceptual ideas that are underlying the process. So lab classes introduce students to a critical cultural aspect of science and engineering, that all ideas need to be tested in a rigorous and particular manner for them to be considered true. So they understand that concept in an experiential way. Okay. And this is what in the past it was done, that many universities actually in the 1860s, long time ago, for example, University of Oxford or Cambridge, were not willing yet to teach empirical science because the laboratory environment did not exist. And as you can see, Thomas Huxley developed a program at the Royal School of Mines, now it's part of Imperial College of London, to teach school teachers how to teach science, including how to design laboratory for teaching experimental science. There were some criticism, and there are some criticism of traditional labs or workshops. One of the criticism is limited in the kinds of equipment and experience that scientists, engineers, and trade people need today. So the students actually get a limited experience in the lab because it's not really a real world experience. When they become more sophisticated and expensive, it becomes increasingly difficult to provide. And they are capital and labor intensive, and hence do not scale easily. So in order to make it real laboratory they're using real equipment, they tend to be very expensive, and it's harder to scale. Also, testing is difficult, difficult to test in a traditional lab, and they need to go for new technologies and developments. So these are some of the limitations. Now we're going to move on to problem-based learning. Problem-based learning is working in groups. Students identify what they already know, what they need to know, and how and where to access new information that may lead to resolution of the problem. Okay. Howard Burroughs is physician, and he was a physician and medical educator. He developed it and used the problem-based learning at Masdar University, and with medicine, students who were studying medicine. Used in subjects domains where the knowledge base is rapidly expanding and impossible to master for all the knowledge in a given domain. The role of the instructor in a problem-based learning, usually called a tutor in classic PBL, is critical in facilitating and guiding the learning process. So the teacher is there as a tutor and they facilitate the learning, but the students work in groups. A typical example of a project problem-based learning systematic approach is you clarify concepts, number one, define problem, discuss and analyze the problem, identify possible explanation and solutions, and lastly, set tasks and learning objectives. And they're done in small face-to-face tutorial of 20 to 25 students. So they're bigger than a laboratory, but still the number of students have to be within this range, 20 to 25. The sixth one is they have to find research solutions, and this could be done mainly online. And this research solution done individually or in small group, 4 to 5 students, private study. Number 7, they synthesize the results, solutions, and reflect upon. And this is accomplished in a full group, meeting with the tutor, okay? Usually it's blended learning, although some instructors manage to conduct the problem-based learning fully online using a combination of synchronous and asynchronous online discussions. So it is possible to do it fully online, but traditionally it's a blended learning. What are some of the challenges and merits in using problem-based learning? The challenges are the problems must be carefully chosen to cover curriculum components. Students complain from cognition overload at early steps. Assessment needs to be carefully designed. So there are some challenges, but if the problems are carefully designed and the cognition overload is reduced, assessment is designed carefully, you could overcome these challenges. What are some of the merits or positive things about problem-based learning? It's better for long-term retention of material and developing replicable skills. Also, problem-based learning improves students' attitudes towards learning. Variation on the pure problem-based learning approach can be complemented with traditional lectures for early stages. Remember, the early stages, there were cognition overload, too much information for the learner. So maybe at that time, that stage, you could provide more traditional lectures so students can listen to a professor and take notes to a teacher. So problem-based learning can be beneficial for that and overcome the challenge. The next one is, we looked at the problem-based learning. Now is the project-based learning. By the way, problem-based learning usually is done in healthcare environments, doctors being trained, nurses, anyone in the healthcare. It's mostly, the curriculum can be delivered in a problem-based learning. Project-based learning is more in the science, engineering, and even humanities. It's longer and broader in scope than the case-based learning. And there's more student autonomy and responsibility in the sense of choosing subtopics, organizing their work, and deciding on what methods to use to conduct the project. It's based on real-world problems, which give students a sense of responsibility and ownership in their learning activities. And every good project-based learning should meet these two criteria. Students must perceive the work as personally meaningful, as a task that matters to them and they wanted to do it well. And also the second criteria is the project should be a meaningful project that fulfills an educational purpose. And learners, especially even young adults and more so adults, when you are teaching something using something like this type of approach, they need to see the reasons, the benefits why they're doing it this way. Why are they learning through project-based learning? Or why are they learning through problem-based learning? They need to see the end result. What is the purpose? What are they going to gain out of it? So always try to have a good logical reason to support them. Some of the risk the project can take on a life of its own, okay? With not only students, but the instructor losing focus on the key essential learning objectives. So be careful about that. Or important content areas may not get covered. So you have to make sure that that does not happen. The next one, next type of experiential learning, it could be inquiry-based learning. Here, the learner explores a theme, chooses a topic for research, develops a plan of research, and comes to conclusions. The instructor is usually available to provide help and guidance when needed. Okay? So the instructor here is less active. It takes a less active role compared to the project-based learning. And here are the levels of inquiry-based learning. So the first one, confirmation inquiry, reinforces prior knowledge, what the learner already knows. Second one, structured inquiry. The student follows a set of process. Third, guided inquiry. Research questions are only provided. So this would guide the inquiry and the discovery. Fourth, open true inquiry. Student does everything. So maybe the teacher would work with the student in the structured inquiry and the guided inquiry. But once the research questions are clearly defined and approved, then the student takes over and does everything. This is very similar approach that most graduate school theses are done. This is the way they're done. Either a master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation. They kind of follow this inquiry-based learning. Okay, so teacher involvement, at the beginning you see it is very high, but as you get towards the end, the teacher involvement decreases. And it's done it purposefully. Now I'm going to go and move into the online learning environments and how can we really adapt experiential learning, especially now with the COVID-19 influence. You could do it through blended or flipped learning, okay? And I will explain that. Group sessions at the beginning of the process done in classroom or lab setting, okay? And then this will be more like blended learning. So there will be some face-to-face, some meeting, either it could be asynchronous, you meet with the students, live conference call, video conference call, and you set up, the process is done in the classroom or lab setting. It could be an online lab setting. Conducting research, information gathering, and creating reports or presentations are done through online resources, okay? In the blended learning, there's some either video conferencing, which is online, face-to-face, live online meeting, and then totally online, asynchronous. Or it could be a flipped learning where the teacher provides all the materials that normally are done in class. It provides the videos, the lectures, the lecture notes. The students study that, go through that, and then they have a meeting where they discuss. So the flipped is what normally traditionally is done at home, now it's done with the teacher. And what usually is done with the teacher in the traditional classroom, now it's done at home. Or you could do it fully online. And these are the tools. It could be synchronous tools such as web conferencing, Zoom, Blackboard, Moodle, all different. Or asynchronous tools such as discussion forums or social media for group work. And you could provide, students can create e-portfolios or multimedia materials for reporting the work they've done. Remote labs for experiential work also can be provided. So experiential learning, it is possible. Ideally, it was made for face-to-face and really on a live environment in a classroom or a lab, but it could be done in an online learning environment as well. Can be used to simulate real conditions. In the online learning, simulations can take place. Reduce the time to master a skill, okay? And flight simulators are done by pilots, doctors use simulation, engineers use simulation. So there are virtual reality labs that are available nowadays that actually experiential learning can happen in this online environment. I think this is the end of my presentation. We're going to be looking at the questions and the answers, and I will go over the answers now. So we have, someone agreed with the Chinese proverb. I highly agree. Another person agreed. So that proverb, most of us do agree, that we do remember things that we actually practice and do. We retain it more. Regarding John Dewey, no, I don't know him. John Dewey believed that education should be based on the principles of learning through doing. Yes. Actually, the idea of learning by doing came from John Dewey. Excellent. We have a couple of questions. For you, which one is better, the inquiry-based learning or project-based learning? I think it depends. If the learner is someone who is either senior, fourth year university, or graduate student, I think inquiry-based is the ideal. Inquiry-based, the learner has to be someone who has a lot of information and knowledge already, and they can now discover and investigate on their own. And the teacher's role actually decreases. At the beginning it's very high, but it goes down. If the learner is in high school, or a learner is any of the K-12 or the first few years of the university, I would prefer project-based learning. Project-based learning is students learn how to work in groups. The teacher still guides and works with them. Remember, the project should not take a life of its own, so the teacher has to always facilitate and keep their focus going. So I would do it. And project-based learning, actually, it's interdisciplinary. Any discipline you could use it. You could use it in the humanities, in language, in science. So it's unlimited. All subjects you could use it. Project-based learning. Second question was, are schools here using the project-based learning technique? I believe so. I don't know for sure, but it's an approach to deliver curriculum. So I'm pretty sure that teachers, even in the elementary school, middle school, high school, once they want the students to learn teamwork and cooperation and how to work with others, I'm sure they probably do. Maybe not a project that is 4 weeks long or 4 months long, but maybe they do a 2-week project or 1-week project. So definitely, I believe teachers do use project-based learning. And if it leads into their curriculum, they might use it. So I do believe they do use it. All right, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.